What did we talk about? Everything?
Everything.
I wanna talk about responsibility.
Oh dear.
Last week I made mention of the lady, I made mention of what transpired in the garden in terms of the man blaming the female, saying that, you know, that's the woman you gave me. And from that, I talked about how, I mentioned anyway, how that was the first time that we sought to blame someone else for our own indiscretions. And I think it's an indicator if indeed we are talking about another side of one entity, then that entity in essence is blaming itself, but at the same time disassociating itself from the incident that took place. Does that make sense? And that's what we do. We have a tendency to disassociate ourselves from the incidents that we are responsible for, and as a result of that, we end up kind of sort of looking at other people out the corner of our eyes, but for things that we are actually responsible for. And we have not gotten to the place yet where we truly take responsibility for the strife and the chaos that we bring into the earth, that we cause. And pointing the finger does not change anything. Only thing that pointing the finger does is make us feel a little bit better for the moment, because deep inside we know that the responsibility is actually ours for whatever has transpired. And the other thing that we do is we have a tendency also to blame, quote unquote, God. And I never understood what kind of results one would hope to get from that. The very one to whom you supposedly are praying, asking for relief, that's the one that you get upset with, and that's the one you blame for the strife in your life. Isn't that crazy? I mean, but when you think about it, what do you say?
Well, you're not. Your emotions or your whatever are interfering with your thinking about it, so to speak. So it's just a...
But they're actually one you want better than that. The God that you're blaming is you.
Well, I was going to say that when I first heard it. That's who you're yelling at.
Yeah.
You're looking in the mirror.
So, and I'm going to get into that in a second. And what happens when we begin to point fingers, when we begin to blame other people, or when we begin to blame God, it gives us a sense of that God is, the Creator, is distant from us. There's a gap between us and the Creator, because it's like pointing your finger at something outside of you. And that may very well be one of the reasons it is so difficult for us to accept the idea of the concept that we are gods, because we don't have anybody to blame at that point except ourselves. And the other part of that is that we always talk about we are creators, but we don't think about what we create unless it's something good. We don't think about the chaos that we bring. We don't think about the pain, that we are responsible for.
Well, I think...
Go ahead.
But in the context of everything that we've said, if you're starting from a point that's not the center, and you're going out from that, whatever you think is good might just be good for some immediate something or yourself. So even then.
True. But I think what I'm trying to get to is that the whole idea of self-responsibility or the lack thereof, is actually the culprit that increases the chaos in the earth. Because the less responsibility we accept for what we do or who we are, the more chaos is created as a result of that, because we're not bringing an end to anything, or we're not transforming, or we're not changing anything. Can you see that? So what do? The gap, we attempt to close the gap, by pleading with God, crying out, praying, doing all this stuff, not realizing that it is not the Creator who answers the prayers. It is us who answer our own prayers. In actuality, it is the self that we have created, the earth consciousness, seeking to disentangle itself. The light seeking to disentangle itself from earth consciousness. That's what praying is all about. It's an attempt to disentangle the consciousness. Let me back up for a second, just in case someone did not hear the other part of this some weeks ago. And I think I talked about that here. How in the garden, the actual quote-unquote sin or the entanglement was the entangling of both consciousness, the tree of life consciousness and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Did I talk about that?
We talked about both, but I don't know.
That's what the sin was.
I don't know if we've used that phrase.
Okay.
The word entanglement doesn't come up
Okay.
in my mind as something we've said in here in the last couple of weeks.
Thank you.
We may have said it a different way, but
Well, sin is entanglement, and pleas and prayers are an effort to disentangle. But what happens most of the time is that we don't approach it from the light that we are. We approach it from the earth consciousness, which means that we are not only blaming someone else, but we are also making an effort to receive something from someone else, when we actually are everything that we need and everything that we will ever need. That's what we are. So when we, from this day forward, when we talk about prayer, we should be thinking about the efforts that's being put forth to disentangle. And most of the time, the thing that we call prayer does not serve to disentangle as much as it gets us deeper in, because most of them are selfish. Most prayers are looking for relief for the person who's doing the praying, or for someone who's close to them, as opposed to being as opposed to focusing on mankind. I think that when we tell someone we're going to pray for them, what we're actually talking about is, and without really knowing it, is that we're going to make every effort to help them get disentangled from whatever it is they are entangled with. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's what we actually mean. But that also is something else that I think we don't pay much attention to. And the thing that we don't pay much attention to is that in order for you to pray for someone, in order for you to help someone get disentangled, you have to confront that entanglement. In other words, you become a hedge around that person, and by virtue of being a hedge around that person, you are actually absorbing or exposing yourself to whatever that person is dealing with. Can you see that? So it's not an easy thing. It's not as easy as we think it is. We just throw that out there flippantly and say, I'm going to pray for you. And then when all hell breaks loose, we're trying to figure out why. But I had nothing to do with this. So why is this coming to me? Well, you asked for it. And this is the thing. The universe does not distinguish between whether or not you know what you're asking for. It just delivers. It just happens, It's almost like saying, well, I don't want to fall off this house. I'm going to step off the edge of it. But the universe, the gravity is going to happen, whether you understand it or not. And that's the same principle with the universe. Just because you don't know, it doesn't mean you don't reap either the benefit or the adversity of the efforts. So what happens is the Creator actually gives us the ability and the strength. Gives us the wisdom and the strength, I should say. The wisdom and the strength to do whatever is necessary to get disentangled. And what I mean by that is this. If you look very carefully at the first chapter of Genesis, you see, and God said, you do not find the word Lord or Yahweh in that first chapter at all. It's not there. The only thing that's there is Elohim. And when you go to the second chapter, that's when you begin to see Lord or Yahweh, the Creator. So and when you see that, in that first chapter, you see the pattern laid out for what is to come. In the second chapter, you see the garment being put together based upon the pattern that was laid out in the first chapter. And when the garment is being put together based upon that pattern in the first chapter, that's when you begin to see Yahweh Elohim. So what I'm saying is that without Yahweh, then the pattern would not have been formed. So it is, and the pattern that was formed was to create or to bring into existence an entity that was called the Adam, which is actually an entity that carries with it the essence of Elohim, because that's the image of Elohim. But even though it carries the essence, it does not function as Elohim. And it doesn't function as Elohim because it has to make a choice to function that way. So the Adam was created as an entity, but it was not destined to remain the entity that we call Adam. It was destined to make a choice to exercise or to manifest the essence of Elohim, or a choice not to, and it made a choice not to. So when we talk about the Creator giving us the ability and strength, that's where all of it, the wisdom rather, that's where all of it comes into that entity from Yahweh. Now, I think we look at this entity of Adam all in the wrong way. This entity of Adam, if I may, for a moment, try to give an example, maybe someone can help me with this, that it's like creating a ball. And inside that ball is the essence of who you are. And thoughts are in that ball. But it does not do anything. It does not, all it does is dormant. So you give life to it. And when you give life to it, now it makes a choice to be like you, or it makes a choice to be as it chooses to be. And that's what happened with the atom. So the atom is still in existence, even though the atom was not supposed to remain in existence. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay,
Sorry.
what it's like, it's like the atom was the flour. And the flour was going to be made into bread. Or the wheat was going to be made into flour, right? But they don't look alike. So the wheat, the atom is the wheat, the entity, right? That's supposed to be transformed into the flour, the Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never transformed into the Elohim because it chose not to.
So it never went to the flour, it went a different way?
Yes, it went to the meal. No, it went a different way.
And we're lost from the beginning.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
But then to finish the analogy, I would think you'd have to talk about the potential in the wheat. No matter how it was transformed, is still there to be what it should be.
Absolutely.
So even
Yeah.
if you're lost, the potential exists, let's say in you,
Mhm.
to find that point of beginning so you can find the right direction.
Well, you're absolutely on target because that's exactly what Jesus said.
Otherwise
You
you
must
can't.
be born again. You must return to, you have to go back to the beginning.
Right.
So the potential is definitely there, but the potential is not worth a dime if you don't use it. I mean,
Right.
the cemetery has more potential than any place.
Wasted.
Wasted potential. So what I'm saying is that the wisdom and the strength is always available, but it is not available for you to utilize light to go buy a car because you want to feel better about yourself. But the potential is there for you to be what you were created to be. For you to manifest the essence of Elohim. Am I making sense now? You see it now? Okay. Yeah.
I remember hearing something about Elohim, like wanting to experience something different, right? So this choice to go a different way isn't necessarily negative, but is an opportunity to experience, I don't know what the words would be,
Nothing is negative.
right?
Everything is an opportunity.
Mhm.
There in the scripture, there's no point in the scripture, when I say negative, I'm talking about the absence of negative. There's no place in the scripture where you find punishment.
Right.
It's not there. You find opportunity.
Mhm.
And there's a big difference between chastisement and punishment.
And what about this business where somebody
But-
did something wrong and then they had to go kill all the people and the animals too?
Yeah, that's.
I'm sorry, that's what I think of when you say punishment.
Well, and that in itself is a spiritual truth
Mhm.
that deals with consciousness as opposed to the literal.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
again, the sages constantly say anyone who literally translates the scripture is literally a fool.
Mhm.
And we cannot, on one hand, talk about God and His Word being the same, and He's spiritual, but His Word is not. So everything there has a spiritual basis. I might not understand the spiritual connection of it all, but that doesn't mean it does not have a spiritual meaning. Okay?
Well, there's a bunch of things, but
Let's take them one at a time.
first of all, maybe I'm wrong. Is it Elohim or who created this? Who created the beginning? It wasn't Elohim.
No.
It's not himself. Who created the space? So the idea of a choice was already there.
Right.
And however you want to imagine it, Ein Sof sitting around in his dinner jacket with a pipe saying, no, I want to do something a little different. Let's see where this goes. Right? I mean, just being facetious, but
Yeah.
we kind of talk around it like that one way or another.
Yeah.
So that's where I think that comes from.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing is, we've said it here 1,000 times, 1,000 ways, that if the world and all we understand of as life around us is a manifestation, we call it a physical manifestation, of the spiritual, then we've said before, you do have, there was a real flood, real in the sense that the flood took place in the material because there was a consciousness flood in the spiritual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The physical didn't create the spiritual showed itself in the material.
Right.
If no one was around to see it, doesn't mean falling tree in the forest didn't make sound, right?
Okay.
It was still there.
Yeah.
Just your ears weren't there, because that's a whole other story. Okay,
Yeah.
all right? Well, no, because what's a sound?
Yeah.
A sound to you and a sound to a worm is not the same thing.
No, we're
right?
good, we're good.
It's all about vibration.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that fits. I mean, it's okay.
And it does. In that, what we have done, we have interpreted the spiritual as being physical. We have labeled things evil in the sense that we call things evil, not unright the way it actually is. We have identified things that are, the things that are there to strengthen us, we have identified them as something that weakens us because we don't want to deal with it. I mean, you know, when you think about where all the turmoil comes from in your life, it's because of the negative actions that you did, that you commit. Or in this life or past life. It just is there not to destroy you, but it's there to strengthen you. So it's all in how we perceive it. So when we look at it from this perspective, then that in itself should help us see more clearly the whole idea of our prayers are being directed toward us, because we're to fix this thing. And I guess it would be no different than a child who is away in school, and the wisdom and the strength that the child needs to continue comes from their parent. The encouragement, you know, the resources comes from that parent. But the kid has to do the work. Can you see the analogy? That's how I see this whole,
What do you mean by resources?
whatever they need, strength.
Yeah, I mean, what the child is gonna work with is basically what that home environment
Let's put in it.
has created
Yes.
that it can draw from, which explains the challenge, the distortion, etc. If you don't have a focused point of origin, so to speak. It's back to that saying, if you start off center, then
You're done.
you're not gonna throw a perfect pot, right? So,
And we deactivate the power of the light that we are. And, oh, Sheldon.
Yeah, you can go ahead, but I just wanted to say something with what you're saying now and tie it back to when you were talking about blaming earlier today, or a little while ago.
Okay, let me say this then bring it in, okay?
Okay.
We deactivate the light that we are. And the way we do that is by not fully acknowledging the pain and suffering that we're responsible for. The responsibility of what we bring into the earth by virtue of our thoughts and our actions. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, something along the lines of what you just said just now too is that we as humans, we accept things more that we do when it's positive than when it is actually negative. Then it's something else outside of us that was the reason for that thing for taking place, so we don't take responsibility for it. But in blaming others, whether it be blaming God or for any particular situation, and when you were just talking about those are things that you have to pay for because of karma, whether it was this lifetime or another lifetime, until you actually deal with those things and accept the blame for them and grow from them, those things will just continue to happen. So it's just like you're playing a game, you're just repeating the board over and over and over again because you haven't even decided to accept the mission to grow is what you're doing when you first accept responsibility for a thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to go through this board to finish it. But if not, you're just going to start over from the beginning, over and over again continuously. You'll just see it in different forms. Sooner or later, you'll make the connection that it's the same thing as repeating itself.
And when we do that, what we're actually doing is playing the victim. Because if I don't take responsibility for my actions, then if someone else did it, I'm the victim of that someone else. And we do not get the prayers answered, or we do not answer our prayers, or we don't reach the goal that we intend to reach until we stop playing the victim. Because as long as you see yourself as a victim or speak that way, what you're actually doing is disassociating yourself from who you were created to be.
Yeah, so you're denying your power. Every time you do that,
Yeah.
you're saying, I don't have any power in this situation. It's completely out of my hands. So you making you're minimizing yourself.
And then the Bible and prayer becomes an empty symbol. It's an empty symbol with no power whatsoever. It's the strongest instrument that we have for what we call this warfare is actually prayer and the direction we get from the book. And when I say prayer, I'm not talking about the classical sense of prayer. I'm talking about what we described earlier. When we realize that we are appealing through the light that we are, as opposed to the confusion we brought into being, that is when we become the captains of our own fate. That's when we began to move away from the idea of being victim. And it is no different than when we go through changes, whether it be at home or with friendships or school or wherever. When you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, then and you stop being the victim, you become proactive. And when you become proactive, that's when things begin to change. And the reason I believe that we become proactive and things change in the natural is to show us what's possible in the spiritual if we become proactive. But you cannot do it if you feel like you are the victim of the circumstances. Because if you're the victim of the circumstances never change, and the circumstances are your God. And that's a real issue. So,
Is that why people find it hard to change?
say again?
Is that why people find it hard to change?
Yes. And that's also why people are unwilling to accept what we call positive criticism. You know, if you're constantly involved in something, and if I take it upon myself to say, you know, you need to speak differently, or you need to let this go, then we're more apt to respond to that in a this is not your business type way, regardless of how close we are to each other. Because why? I think maybe we like being a victim. Are we so comfortable with being a victim? And the reason someone who's closer is able to see it is because they are there to help you move forward.
But
Yeah.
even on the negative side, why doesn't the woman or the partner leave? It can be a man too. Why doesn't the partner leave the other partner who's continually abusing them?
Right.
Because there's some emotional
Attachment.
need or attachment or connection that overrides, right? And I think part of it is, what was going through my mind was the whole idea of a Zen koan. You got to get through those. For you, it might be 500. For me, it might be 5,000 questions until you're exhausted to the point you go, enough. And the enough moment is the equivalent of that person, without the slightest bit of thought for self, is able to rip that door open in the car and pull somebody out in an accident. And no one can physically explain why. But most of the time, you spend your life taking the weight off of you weight by weight. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of realizing, poof,
You can do it all
the
at
whole
once.
idea of weight can be, but it's because I think a lot of that help you get is very piecemeal. I mean, a lot of the stuff, for example, in the Buddhist Zen kind of thing, you go away, and you go away for a period of time, whatever that time has to be. So you do whatever you can do to kind of go through the whole thing, give it all to me,
Yeah.
and work your way through it all until you reach that moment. And if you're just doing it in little moments of passing in the day, I'm not saying it can't happen, because whatever, explodes the thing, explodes it, but that's just a piece of it. So it's a lot easier to have those other pieces just overwhelm that again, and now you're back kind of weird. Does that make,
Yeah, it does.
I'll use your phrase, does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense. The idea of
Because we're not really our brother's keeper, except in instances, small instances.
see, I don't believe that we have to live lives of turmoil and discontentment. We don't have to experience those things. We have the ability, we have the wisdom to be able not only to rise above it, but to make the corrections that's necessary so others don't have to do it. If only we would move beyond victimhood and take the courage to say what needs to be said at the moment that it needs to be said with the right motives. And even though we say things, or we should be saying them at the time that they need to be said with the right motives, it does not mean that the person who you're speaking to is ready to receive it. And it doesn't matter whether they're ready to receive it or not. If this inclination, if you know that you're supposed to say it, you say it.
I would say they are ready to receive it. They may not just be ready to do anything with it, because the timing is right if you have that inclination. They're supposed to hear whatever it is you have to say.
They just don't want to act on it.
Exactly.
And maybe the seed that you put there is there for them to act on later, or for someone else to nurture, to get them to see that. Because how many times have we known people who say, you know what, you're the third or the fourth person who said that to me.
Yeah.
I must need to deal with it. And that's because but if that first person had not said it, you see, then it would not have.
Or they come back to you and say, I was doing such and such and I heard your voice.
Yeah.
You know?
And this sounds so simple, but
Usually we're doing the other though, aren't we? We're going, all right, I give up.
it's
Right? You're on your own. I've done the best I can. You're on your own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But it's the most difficult thing to do.
Because we expect them, right?
Diane?
No, Sheldon was going to say
Okay.
something.
Oh, only thing I was saying is no expiration date on anything that you actually say.
Right.
There's no, it's things that I've heard many of the elderly, older adults say about their parents told them, and all of a sudden it just clicked and it makes sense to them, even when they have kids or something like that. So that has actually gone on for decades. So there's no expiration date on anything that's actually said. Diane?
Thank you for passing the ball on to me, Joe. No, I was just thinking it's so profound, this discussion today. I think because for the last 3 weeks, what's been rising up in me, I've been hearing not just my grandmother's voice. Someone told me the other day I am truly the reincarnation of my grandmother. But I was saying, wow, when I was coming up, we had this village where everybody was saying these things to us, so it was imparting this into us. So when we got older, we would have something to draw from. And I was like, wow, I'm seeing so many kids now don't have the grandparents, because ever since I knew my grandmother, like she was old, but don't have the grandparents. There's grandparents being grandparents. They're speaking some kind of wisdom or enlightenment into their life. And don't have the mothers don't have anyone around them that's
Mom in the club with
yeah, it's mama. Because I've seen, it's wild when you sit there and you see 4 generations together and they're all dressed alike, saying like, doing the same thing. And I'm like, oh my God, the baby has no other choice but, because that's all it's seen.
Yeah.
So I've been like speaking so much of it lately, and I've had people at work saying, wow, I never heard that before. I got to put that one in my memory, right? Wow, I never heard that one before. And the only people that can relate to me is people older than me or my age that had someone saying that. So sometimes when I say stuff, but actually look at me like, what? OMG.
and she look at you the same way that we look at our parents and grandparents when they said it.
But the
that
whole,
makes
I
sense.
think Yeah, well, what you were saying, it has to be, it's almost like it was left in us so we can have it in us to regurgitate and put out.
Yeah.
Because if not, then, I don't want to say disarray, but it is like disarray.
But-
I guess whenever school ticks in, it's like you see the afflux of the madness again, and you're like, okay, don't get overwhelmed with it. You just have to do whatever you have to do and part that.
You know what though? There has to be a reason for that.
Okay,
There has to be a reason for it seemingly coming to an end.
okay.
You know, the wisdom with the grandmothers type thing, what we're talking about? That it has to be a reason for that. Why?
And that's why I'm
Why is
wondering,
that so?
why is it so that
Because we have to get it from inside now. We don't have the luxury of someone that looks external to kind of feed us that.
It's almost like the ego has been pushed out of the nest. It's time for you to get it on your own. And people don't search for what we call balance and what they call peace in their life. They don't search for that unless there is a reason to. And usually the reason they do it is because of the discomfort that they experience. And the discomfort that we are seeing, that we are experiencing, is there so we can be the vanguard. All the people that that we see, you talk about generations dressed alike, hanging out in the club alike, those are not the ones who necessarily have to change. Everybody's not going to change. Maybe it's just the people in this room, or the people who are on Skype, or the people wherever. Maybe it's just 20 people needs to change, and it has an effect on the whole of mankind. Because think about it this way: we have responsibility for what we call darkness in this earth. It is both personal and global. Because we personally, we deal with these things that we see that are confusing. We deal with those things that we call ourselves a victim as a result of. We bring that into our lives. But when that happens, we are also putting these negative things into the world. That's why the world is so confused. So if we help bring order, then order follows the same course. Can you see that? The reverberation is the same. So maybe, just maybe, we are at a crossroads where we must begin to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And if we don't, then we are no different than were the disciples. They made mistakes. We are no different than Israel at Mount Sinai. They made mistakes. We have the benefit of the errors that were made so that we can avoid them. We have the benefit of that. I don't know a generation, or I don't know anyone who I have come in contact with during my course of study, whether it be philosophy, religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or whatever. I don't know anyone who actually says that the disciples were wrong. They made mistakes. Just because they appear in the scripture, everybody think they're right. Until you begin to understand that the scriptures were handpicked by a select group of people.
Why
Well, there
would
are a
they
few
think
clues.
that? Because look how many times Jesus rebuked them.
Well, for the same
Evidence
reason
there.
they say that Jesus was born God, in the sense that we are not. Why? Because that's what's been put out there. I mean, you look at somebody, you call him Saint Peter. The first thing you think about a saint is purity. Yeah, so that in itself is a subconscious way of saying that they don't do anything wrong. Now,
Separating.
we have to recognize that was wrong. We have to recognize the mistakes that were made. We have to recognize the doubt that they expressed. We have to recognize the uneasiness that they felt. We have to recognize the fear that they experienced. And when we recognize that, and we ourselves began to take responsibility for that, and desire to move beyond that, then just maybe that's when we reach critical mass and begin to see a dramatic change in the whole of humanity, simply because of our thoughts changing and our actions changing. And I think did we talk about the other week about making sure that you maintain positive thoughts. If anything comes to you, that you push it out, or you transform it so that you don't breathe negative or confused energy. Everyone with whom I've spoken who did that talked about how comforting it was, and how much better they slept at night as a result of that. The idea is simply saying, when you do that, all you're saying is, for lack of a better expression, live out of your higher nature. That's all you're saying. Live as you were created to live. Think as you were created to think. Because without the confusion, it would be impossible for the atom to become Elohim. Because Elohim is the creator, right? And if everything was handed to Adam, then he would not be the image, or it would not be the image of the Elohim. So the confusion had to be there in order to for the atom to be able to bring balance, to bring order to those to what we call this earth realm. You have a new earth thing that's coming out of all of this.
I feel like we're creating it.
Creating
A new heaven and a new earth.
We are. And the new is not new in that it never existed. It's talking about a freshness. It's talking about a cleansing. It's talking about order. And the new, when it talks about a new earth, it's not talking about trees going to be new. It's a consciousness that's going to be in balance with the consciousness of heaven or enlightenment. And one of the things that has taken place that has limited that, or if not seriously halted it, is the whole idea of being confused about life and death. When you die, you go to heaven. But he's the God of the living, not the God of the dead. Well, this is not life, this is death, but I'm going to die. And that's confusing, as opposed to looking at it from the way it really is. Exiting the body is not death as we talk about death. It's simply transitioning to the other realm where you see life as it really is. What is it?
No, I was just thinking, we're really all butterflies, right?
Absolutely, we are. We are.
Well,
And
some of us may be moths.
and the
Whatever that means.
this body is the place where the transition must take place before you transition. And what I mean by that is, we are here to do that. When we talk about tikkun, making corrections, when we talk about making these corrections, the corrections are not made for me. It's made for us. What I do is not for me. It's for us. And the us meaning mankind, one yet many, which is the same thing as Elohim, one yet many. So we have looked at this thing from perspective that is totally different than what is actually there in the book itself. When we look, when we look at the 10 utterances, or what we call the 10 commandments, when we look at those from the real perspective of how they were written, then we begin to see that there are 5 that deal with the earth, and there are 5 that deal with the heavenly. And they actually are paired together. And when you deal with them from that perspective and you begin to see the spiritual nature of them, that's when actually these 10 utterances is all we need to understand in order to bring balance. If we could grasp the nature of the 10 utterances and hold on to that, it would the transition would take place instantly, or the transformation, I should say, would take place. Why were those 10 utterances given? Why is it that regardless of what religion you look at, you can find pretty much the same thing? It doesn't matter what you call a religion. You can find pretty much the same thing. And I say pretty much simply because it's not worded the same. But the concept, the essence, is the same. So why is it so repetitive, regardless of where you are or regardless of what you believe? Why?
Same source.
Same source, but also the only way.
So the necessary gateways to reach the position of Elohim. The necessary paths that you must take within yourself.
Well, truth.
The only thing religion is doing, before a religion actually gets diluted and becomes a business, is explain it in different ways.
Well, it's cultural. Yeah.
So it's like a foundation.
A foundation, but it's not only the foundation, but it's also the building itself. You know, it's like we are not just we're not just the weapon, but we are the ones who use the weapon, but we are the weapon ourselves. And the weapon that we are is not a weapon to fight each other. It's a weapon that brings things into balance. You know, and we need to begin dealing with this idea of balance, this idea these ideas of balance and prayer and ability and wisdom. We need to begin dealing with them different than what we have. Even when we think about them, we need to think about them differently than what we have. You know, when we think about praying, it should not be just the utterance of words. We should think about to whom we are speaking and for what reason.
Yeah, I wanted to say some things about prayer too. I've been thinking about it since you were talking about a little while ago, praying for others. So, yeah, to go a little bit further, when you say you're praying for someone, if you're actually doing it right, if you're actually subjecting yourself to all of the pain, struggles, or entanglement that person is actually dealing with. But I also thought about it from another perspective, that's not a negative thing. I postulate that when you do that, you're actually forcing yourself to grow on an accelerated level, because you're actually forcing yourself to act as God in the place of that person. You're saying that you're strong enough to actually deal with that situation, and you're willing to take on all of that to help them out. So is that not what supposedly God does? Because God has the ability to do that?
And that's what we're asking God to do. And when we start talking about, well, you understand enough to do this on your own. It is at that point when we are simply saying that no longer are we separate sparks or perceive ourselves as separate sparks. We're beginning to come together as a flame. You see, it's like regardless of where the body is, we're still on the same page. And that's why a lot of our responses are the same. Is not because we are figureheads or yes men. It's because, as Richard said earlier, truth is truth. It doesn't matter how it comes or who it comes from. If it's truth, it's truth. And the reason that one of the reasons I should say that when we talk about what we do in terms of Saturday morning or whether it be Sunday morning, Monday night, when we talk about or whenever we come together as facilitators, when it's find difficult to explain what we do, is because you can't remember the truth. The truth is not there for you just to remember and regurgitate like you would a poem. You become that truth, or you become aware that you are that truth. And so when the need arises for you to say something, do something, or present something to someone else, that's when it comes out. And it doesn't, and it's a great thing that it's not something you remember, because if you were to remember it, then you would be using the same words, phrases, and saying exactly the same thing that whoever you learned it from is saying. It would be recited like a poem. So maybe Sheldon today, Nick tomorrow, Ron next week. Now you're confused.
Well, that's, it's never helpful. And it irritates me sometimes. And they mean well. You're dealing with someone who's religious, and they're giving you the platitudes that they've been given because that's all they have. And it probably does not apply to you. It's not personal. It's just a formula that they've been given. And I'm like, that's not comforting. That's not helpful. Thanks. I know you're supposed to be patient,
So you're thanking her for not being helpful?
No, I'm just being smart.
So we know how to get your goat.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of this whole thing. What's your hand on?
Yeah, but finish your thought.
A perfect example of this whole thing of I'll pray for you. That's a platitude.
That's what.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the Lord on your behalf. What are you doing?
That was my thing, that I was going to say what Janice said, because I'm just seeing an influx of requests where people are, well, it ties in with the victim thing. Well, I got this going on with me, and pray for me. And then everybody's, oh, I'm going to pray for you, sister. I'm going to pray for you, brother. And I'm like, do you really know what it means when you say you're going to pray for this person, or let's go to detail?
I think those people are asking for a connection sometimes.
You think?
Like, just hear what I'm going through and connect to me. But those are the only words they have.
Yeah.
Right? But they're just looking for someone, like, can you just feel my struggle for a minute, please?
Yeah, Yeah.
But even with that,
I don't
it's,
think
and at some point, because based on, it's like within, we're saying there's a within that at some point the light bulb got to come on. Okay, I don't want to be a victim anymore, because the word that's been coming to me a lot has been deception, and with all of us, we deceive ourselves. I know that at some point you want to get out of that pity party, or having everybody say I pray for you, or the devil is a lie. And it's just because bottom line is with me is get to the root of the problem and see what it is and the situation is, and it's always pointing back to me. But I want to take it off me. I want to put it on somebody else, and then I want to have this little pity party where I get everybody in to say I'm praying for me. But if it's a year later, everybody's still praying for you, and it's still the situation, then it should be a question mark on what's wrong.
I'm sure the question mark, who do they know?
Yeah, because I'm sitting like,
It's like the homeless man said, I'm going to pray for you, so don't do that.
yeah.
Don't do that.
I had someone tell me that the other last week, and I was like, no, don't do that. I was kind of get my Kevin Hart voice. No, please don't pray for me. And it was the whole thing is, I guess for a whole couple of months ago, I didn't know what was going on, and now I know with the hair coming off. Everybody coming up thinking I got cancer. And they don't pray. I don't know, I really don't have it. And then, you know, with everything that we've been talking about for the last week with me, I've been going to the oncology place because the doctor's trying to find out what's going on with me. I'm anemic. But, you know, they send you to the place where they send all the cancer people. And so everybody thinking I got, and want to rub your back. And I'm like, ooh, no, this is cool. And this morning I ran into somebody in Walmart. I was trying, and she was like, ooh, and just rubbing me, baby. No, it's okay. So I said, and where's the India? I have not my hair. I'm good. I just took it all off. And she was like, oh, I should know you because your personality, you just always, I was like, yeah, I'm good. It's hot. It's okay.
Your heart won't have cancer, right?
Don't go, don't go on now.
So,
Because she was like, see, because my husband have it. That's okay. Ooh. You know, but it was like what you were saying earlier when you were saying about think positive so you won't. And I put that, what you said, that I challenged myself to do, and it just helps so much for when you're going to go in and you're running, because sitting in that place, I don't feel the heaviness. Is like, I saw it. And as I sat around and I listened to the women tell their stories, with me, it's like, it doesn't have to be this way. If you really, it doesn't have to be this way, and you are not the cancer, or you are not what it is. And it's like I saw the being trapped in it and taking this on as me, and this is who I am. You are not cancer. You are not. I'm going back to this doctor, and I told Pastor it was so easy for to do, and I saw the thing read down, but even saying all the tests that they ran and what was the result online beforehand, but even I was already prepared. If I went in, he said, I don't know, I don't want to do something else. I already told him the week before, you ain't doing that, what you said. You're not going to go do the bone marrow thing. No, not taking another needle, not doing nothing that. But I just saw so many of people I saw the not knowing, and I'm the kind of the victim and everything tied to it, and it became the stories, this is who I am. And in essence, you're not.
you actually did, after bone marrow don't hurt no more, the way they do it.
Well,
But anyway,
we'll find out.
It doesn't hurt.
So that was kind of like one of the things I wanted to
Okay.
ask you on that too. It's not overwhelming. It's just seeing it. With me, it's like I'm thankful that I've had the 21 years of teaching, and even in the 21 years, we've just gotten to this point to just really getting to the meat and potatoes of it, that I can handle it and not being as suspect as in if I was religious and would take that on too.
Let me tell you something. I had someone ask me to pray for them. I counsel a lot of people I never met. And when they say, will you pray for me? I say, of course. Because I know they don't. When Janice talked about them trying to unload or want you to connect to them, I don't think they're aware of it, but that's pretty much what's happening. But they don't. But if you were to ask them, what do you mean pray for you? They will go to what they've been taught. But deep inside, they're really asking for a connection there. When someone comes to me, regardless of who they are, and tells me that they either think they have cancer or they have it, or any terminal disease for that matter, the first thing I say to them is this: be honest with yourself. You are afraid, so deal with it. Just be afraid. We can handle the rest. Because those are things that they have to deal with. And I have not met one person whose initial response was not fear. Not one person. And the next thing I say to them is, if you feel like you need to be upset with God, go right ahead. We can handle all of this. But those are things that's beginning in the earth consciousness and moving them to a consciousness of enlightenment. You have to take people where they are. Because it does not matter how enlightened we think we are. Let somebody tell you go die. You got 6 months to live. All of a sudden, right now you might not feel it. But things change. You know, the car is not important, the house is not important, bills are not important, job is not important. All of a sudden, that's you're narrowly focused. And it is at that point that you don't need somebody rubbing your back. You don't need someone telling you, I'm going to intercede for you. You need somebody to listen. To listen. You don't need anyone to listen to you who's going to correct you.
Yeah.
I'm afraid, well, God did not give us the spirit of fear. I don't want to hear that. What does that mean anyway?
Somebody gonna get slapped.
I mean, yeah, no one, boy, you've been about in your old age.
I'm prerogative. I'm a
Yeah,
woman.
what did you raise over there?
A woman.
Thank you.
So but we, they don't need that. We have the wisdom. We are the wisdom that they are asking to help them move beyond that. We are the wisdom. And when I say that, I'm talking about, there are people who feel like because they've been taught in this word church or whatever you want to call it, that no matter what happens, they're ready. That's not the truth. I don't know what my response would be if they told me I had 6 months to live. At first, I wouldn't tell nobody. God don't want nobody walking to me.
Yeah.
I don't want that. But I'll spend my 6 months around people I'm close to. But I have to tell them. But even at that, I probably would need at least one person to talk to. Somebody. I don't know. I do. I know once that that's a few years ago, maybe about 10 years or more, that they thought there was a possibility that I had cancer, and nobody really knew until after they found out it wasn't. So it doesn't matter. But what matters is the person. The person in front of you is what matters. Now, what we do, I guess what we're talking about doing is waking ourselves up. Remember Adam went to sleep? We were talking about waking ourselves up to the awareness of who we are and the accountability that we must take, the responsibility that we must take. Waking ourselves up to awareness. We know this. We say it. So you better wake up and see what's going on. Do we not say that?
Mm-hmm.
So we have these spiritual things that we say, but they have become earthly cliches. But they are real. And maybe we don't want to wake up because it's too much responsibility. When you think about it.
Well, I guess if subconsciously or whatever, if you have in your mind that it's too big, you know what I mean? It's like no one wants to tackle a problem that's overwhelming. So the only way I've learned, a big complicated problem is a lot of little problems that take steps to work your way through. But if you just see it as the big problem, I don't want anything to do with that. That's,
I tell you one,
it'll roll over me and crush me.
Well, I would see, I'm driving and I'm thinking that, you're teaching people that we are the ones who change this world. And you're driving, right? And you see all these people driving beside you, all these people around you, like, oh my God. Who the hell am I to think I can change all these people? And those are the kind of things that I battled with in the beginning. What gives you the idea that you are so special that you can deal with the issues that confront all of these people plus the rest of the people in the world?
I was going to say, sorry. It's the weather.
Except Sheldon's got New York covered.
I was going to say, Just hit the brakes and
Yeah.
see what happens. You just changed everybody's life.
But that's the vastness of it. But when you begin to see that you are not the person in the other car, in terms of the physical you, that all of you are one in terms of the spiritual you, then it makes a difference. Now, I'm probably the opposite of a lot of people. The more complex or the larger the problem is, the more I'm apt to deal with it. I don't like letting stuff fester, just sit there. If it's an issue, I'm going to deal with it. And you, sometimes I do it. I deal with issues that's not there. So I have to take my time to step back. Because I've said things about stuff that I had to go back and apologize for because it wasn't an issue. But anyway.
You need to deal with something.
Yeah. Me? That wasn't the deal, right? So anyway, when we began to awaken, when we talk about awakening, we talk about being in contact with or being more aware of the heart. What's in your heart? Most of us are very much aware of what's in our mind, what's in our head, what's in our heart. Most of us are not aware of what's in our heart. Because the heart is the seat of all of that wisdom and all of that strength. And we know that too. Because we say, you didn't have the heart to do it. Meaning the strength of the courage. You see? When we speak wisdom to somebody, we just say, you have a good heart. So you have a heart for people. We talk about these things, but we don't think about what we're actually saying. So I'm at a point where I can feel the difference. I can feel the difference between me thinking about doing something and sensing I need to do it. I can feel the difference but the difference between the earth consciousness or awareness and the heavenly awareness or the light awareness. I can feel the difference between the two. And I miss it sometimes, but I'm becoming more and more proficient at being able to distinguish between those. And being able to distinguish between them gives opportunity to bring order or correction to the earth consciousness. Example, you say, well, something told me not to do that, but I did it anyway. That was an opportunity to distinguish between the two. I'm beginning to the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I'm beginning to be able to sense, not just in me, but in other people when I'm talking to them. And when I sense it, when I'm talking to them, I can tell when they are embellishing, or I can tell when they're hiding something. It's easier for me to see it. And it's not prophecy at all in terms of how we know what we think about prophecy. Because the prophet is the one who speaks the mind of God, right? So you speak in your mind. You see? So that those distinctions are necessary if we are going to correct the sins or the entanglements. And the thing that helps us to do that is the light that we are, the light, the spark of light that we are, that's in us. That's what helps us to be able to do that. But you have to have a desire to do it. Plus, you have to develop a desire for the will to do it. And see, the idea of will is things coming together in harmony, coming together in harmony and moving as one. So when you talk about the will of God, it's talking about you being in balance, you being in harmony, and you moving as one. Now, that's what we call miracles. When it's not a miracle that some external view, performed or brought into being. It is your desire moving as one with the Creator. You being the essence of Elohim, you recognize that when your will is for that, then what your will is actually doing is going through a transforming of the tree of knowledge of good and evil to be like the tree of life. Because if you look at the tree of knowledge of good and evil, there's no life there. We talked about that, didn't we? There's no life there. Did we talk about that? There's no life in the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
We talked about it a bit.
Well, we said inherent in it. No, we're the ones who
We're the
put the
one
energy in. We
gives it life.
We give it power, so
Yes.
to speak.
Right.
Actually, maybe I was going to wait till after the class, but because you brought it up.
Uh-huh.
Can we not, and I haven't, maybe we've done this in different ways, but I've just been sitting over here staring at the structure of the tree of life there, which is hidden, but that's not prophetic.
Right.
Okay? I don't think.
It is.
Can see through it. Okay, fine. Well, then it should be uncovered. But anyway, can you not construct similarly the tree of good and evil in a similar structure?
Yes.
And have we done that?
That is it. It's just a flip. Is it as above, so is below. Yeah.
I don't know, okay, like and all that kind of stuff, but okay, I'm visual and occasionally literal. So why can't we make two trees? One is the tree of life and the other is the tree of good and evil, and you can see the hidden one may be the spark, the essence that transforms the one to the other. One's the flip side. Say it any way you want.
Yeah.
But I was literally sitting here. I mean, I was thinking in a literal way, what would you put in the circles?
Oh, okay.
What emotions, what feel, that kind of thing, which are then transformed
You will
by, right?
You put exactly the same thing in the circles. Exactly the same thing.
The difference is the source, right?
The source.
Yeah.
The source.
So crown would basically be the God you created.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Instead of wisdom and understanding, you might put whatever male,
you
female.
put, but
Well,
you
you're
put
gonna have
that.
some kind of
You put
understanding.
wisdom and understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing, you're using the wisdom that you developed
Right.
and the understanding that you chose to make application to. I mean, to apply to the book or whatever. So you will put exactly the same thing, but there's another step to the tree. You have
It's hidden.
receive
Let me take that out.
and what is it? The left and right pillow is one is to receive, one is to share.
Wow.
It's loud. Keep that louder.
Okay, the right column is to receive. The left column is to share. And the garden experience was receiving only until the entanglement took place. And at the point of the entanglement taking place, then the desire to receive for the purpose of sharing is what brought both of the trees, combined the column, really, I should say, with the center column. Because the center column deals with balance and experience. So you have to balance the receiving with the sharing. Can you see that? So it's there's more to the tree than just, what we have written in the circles and stuff. It represents the whole concept of receiving for the purpose of sharing. Because if you are just receiving for self alone, then there's no balance there. And that's greed. Can you see that?
Well, but I'm just trying to think of what you're saying and continue the analogy you started. You still have receiving and sharing in the tree of good and evil.
You do.
But what you're receiving and what you're sharing, obviously. So to me,
And I'll tell you
what I'm inclined to think is, if you just think of one as being the backside of the other, in which case, to be analogous, the backside would be the flip side of the front.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a metaphor there too, but I'll work that one out next week. But anyway, but to me then, what connects the two and transforms the one to the other? What turns that Rubik's Cube or turns it, and maybe it's the dotted line, it's the illusion of separation.
The
Which
illusion of
means
separation.
if you construct your tree with a sense of separation, you wind up constructing a form of the tree of good and evil.
And that's exactly what we
If
constructed.
you have the sort of connection to the truth, however you want to say it, it's what transforms it. I'm just trying to think of some simple way to look at it and how they relate.
That's the balance
That's
that we're
where I would
talking
see
about.
it.
And that's exactly what it is. And that is the reason those same things that appear, and people can't see what we're talking about. We're talking about this tree. Deborah, would you move this over, please, so they can
If I-
actually see what we're talking
If
about?
I just finish then for a second while she's doing that, then
What do
for
you
me-
need, Janice?
Hmm?
So they
Yeah, either if on the TV
right
or
on the TV.
that's fine.
Okay.
so that's the back of it.
Oops.
So now
Oh.
actually, if you put the camera in front of
Now
you,
you see the floor.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, but you're not going to see it.
They can see it
I
from
can?
there, yeah.
I was just looking.
I'll do it. That's okay.
So, but Pastor, so then to finish
Yeah. Mhm.
that, my whatever it is. So we mistakenly try to find, and you can, it's just a more complicated, confused journey. If you take any one of those circles, just to use the analogy, and try to find the connection to the truth through them, as opposed to focusing on, which is what we say through breathing and meditation, etc., the core concept, which is the illusion of separation. In other words, if I focus on I have the wrong understanding of things, I have the wrong sense of eternity, I don't know, pick any one of those. Theoretically, you can find your way through that, through reflection, meditation, etc., back. But ultimately, the way to really transition one tree to the other inside of you is through the illusion of separation, and then all the other changes with it. You follow it? Does that make sense?
It does make
Okay,
sense.
does that make sense?
Yeah, the idea of the illusion of separation comes into play when the Adam says, I don't have responsibility for what happened. She does. It's that woman you gave me. That's separating itself from what it was created to be. It's separating itself from responsibility. Now, this illusion of separation is actually the thing that brings us to the place where we desire balance. The illusion of separation eventually pushes you to a place where you begin to ask yourself, am I really separated? And if so, what separates me? And the thing that I have found that separates most people is religion. That's where the illusion comes from. Religion tells you that, and it is a business, by the way, religion tells you that nothing can separate you from the love of God. And God is love. So nothing can separate you, right? But on the other hand, religion tells you that God is in heaven and you on earth. So that's the sense of separation. So what's happening is that the earth and heavenly consciousness, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life, they are not separated from each other. They are intertwined. They are entangled. They're entangled with each other. That's the sin. That's the entanglement. And the realization that the oneness exists between the created and the creator is what begins the disentanglement. the desire to know what it to realize the experience rather of the oneness between the creator and the created. The heart of the atom, the desire of the atom is to be the essence that it feels in itself, to become that essence. And that essence itself is the tree of life.
Okay, what I would say from what you said is, more so, the tree of good and evil is the other side of the coin, which is just to create an image in your head. The two sides, almost like yin and yang,
Mm-hmm.
containing each other, etc., but having the sense of being different because of the invisible, that sort of dotted invisible, that's the real button, so to speak, that transforms the one into the other. So the fact when you use words like entangled,
Mm-hmm.
it's because there's only an entanglement, I would think, because your sense of separation is still existent, even if somewhat reduced. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Truth has confusing aspects to it until you just see it clearly.
Right.
Any kind of problem, when you really, that's why we say in planning and all kinds of things, if you really define the problem properly, you've got the answer.
Right.
And,
So-
and 9/10 of the energy spent is because you really didn't quite get what the essence of what you should be doing. So you're running around it trying to,
Yeah.
that kind of
Now, that's also the place of experience, knowledge. Talks about the experience being intimate with. So, the experience that you have depends on what you desire.
Again, I would say that there's no shortcut to yes, experiencing that connection. You can't intellectualize it because that's only partial, right?
Right.
So the truth comes through the heart or whatever, not the mind, not
Right.
the brain, not the, yeah.
Yeah,
And
right.
if you define mind as a connection of all those things, then it comes through the mind as opposed to the organs, the heart versus the head.
The heart, yeah, the heart becomes the center of it all, the center of the experience. It is from that the life of the spirit grows. It emanates there.
Opens,
Yeah.
it's revealed. Yeah.
So it can intellectualize it is what created the business called church. We don't become spiritual at all. There is no such thing as spirituality. We use those terms. How can you become what you already is? What are you? You are what? Spirit. So you don't become spiritual. There is no such thing as spirituality. It's simply awareness of not being aware or not being aware. Does that make sense?
Well, isn't this the idea of the phrase "washed in the blood of the Lamb"? You're cleansing that, what is it, confusion, darkness, crud off of yourself to reveal the spirit that you are. Isn't that what that should mean?
And see, I take issue with being washed in the blood of the Lamb.
Well, I mean, it's not something I run around.
Yeah, I know, but I do take issue with that. And the reason I take issue with that
I was using
is
the word
because the blood is a classic example of the entanglement of which I speak. Because in Leviticus 17 and something, it talks about the life of the Adam is in the blood. The life of the flesh is in the blood.
Mhm.
So that in itself is the entanglement. So so I take issue with that. In that, the thing that actually does the purification is the divine light. It's the light that we expose our frailties or our confusion to. That's what brings the purification about. That's what does what we call the cleansing.
I don't have a problem with that
Yeah.
as a miss.
Right? No. I'm
'Cause
glad you
actually,
said it.
That's okay, because what I was grabbing on really more was the concept of washing,
Right.
even though that's not.
And the whole idea of washing has with the connotation of being immersed in something.
Mhm.
You know, the mikvah, the woman does mikvah 7 days after her menstrual cycle. But when you start looking at the whole concept of the washing, you find that that this washing also it was done, and I'm talking about in the physical sense now, in a ritualistic way. It was also done for curing diseases, for healing people, diseases, and for bringing the immune system into balance, so people wouldn't be susceptible to so many different diseases. That was done ritualistic for those purposes also. And if that is the case, then the question would be, what does the physical mikvah represent when we start talking about washing and cleansing? And when you look at the structure of it being above ground, half in the ground, half above ground, and having a continuous flow, that's the upper world and the lower world, isn't it? That's what it represents. So when you look at the mikvah, where does the washing take place? It does not take place above ground. It takes place below ground, which means that in the lower world. Are you with me? But after the mikvah is done, when you come up, you've come out of the lower world into the upper world. So it's more about the washing of perspective, the washing of awareness, bringing order to those disordered thoughts, or bringing understanding to a clearer understanding to the wisdom of the book itself. Because if you don't have the understanding, then the wisdom doesn't make sense. Because Janice brought up something about killing animals and stuff earlier.
Right.
That doesn't make sense if you don't have the understanding of that wisdom that's there. And it only comes when the upper, between the two worlds.
Which makes me go out on a limb and want to say that there is really only the tree of life. The tree of good and evil is the illusion created by the sense of separation and the lack of wisdom of the truth, which transforms that into what is the tree of life. Do I need to go outside for a while?
No, just go in the corner. I'm listening to you with all of them.
Put a dunce thing on my head? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do know
It's
what you're
just
trying to
like,
say.
it's just like trying to say, we think of everything as being a duality, but is there really negative and evil, or is it just a positiveness that's not there? It's a vacuum, or it's a transformation? You know what I'm trying to say?
Suppose for a moment that,
Because it would sound to me like,
okay, suppose for a moment that, and I don't want to go here, but I don't want to go anyway. Suppose for a moment that the tree of knowledge of good and evil is simply a mass of thoughts that the Adam was supposed to bring into order. This is the putty that the Adam is supposed to use to create. But rather than create what the Adam saw, or create what the essence desired it to create, it took those thoughts and arranged them the way it wanted to, which is quite different than the arrangement of the tree of knowledge. The tree of life.
mm-hmm.
Now the thoughts are the same. It's just that the ones in the ball called the tree of life, they're in order, and these are not. Now you take this, and the Rubik's cube. One is already solved, and the other one is not.
Right.
So you take it and make it like this.
I think it's a better way to say it.
Yeah,
It's
and
an incomplete.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you have you have all the substance you need to do this, but it has not solved the problem yet. It has not brought into existence the order of the cube yet. Can you see that? And therefore, when we talk about whether you look at this tree or whether we look at it mentally or from anywhere we've been taught, in actuality, it does not exist because it has not met the approval of the Creator. It exists only because we want it to exist.
Good and evil.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is this. The reason I say that is because when you look at the whole concept of the experience in Eden, what you look at, what you begin to see rather, is that Eden is talking about the place of pleasure. So in the midst of all the pleasure that the man can have, there were those thoughts that he needs to bring into order. In the midst of all of that, and the separation supposedly has taken place, and he says, the woman caused me to do that. But when reference is made to this man, even after that, it says, Adam, where art thou? Even after supposedly the separation. It says Adam, where it does not say Ish or Isha. And when you read where Elohim or Yahweh Elohim is making reference, it always references the Adam. It does not reference Ish and Isha, which means that there is no acceptance or recognition of a separation between the two. That only exists because we want it to exist. Even when it talks about the Christ being the second Adam, right? It's talking about, it doesn't say the Israel, it says second Adam. So whenever reference is made based upon what the Creator is saying, it is never acknowledging a separation there. Can you see that? It's never acknowledging that. So the separation, not only does it not exist, it does exist. It does not exist by virtue of not being recognized, but it does exist in our minds.
Well, you're just telling us about the life force that's contained in an illusion.
Yes. And we are the life
It
force.
exists as an illusion. It's not the truth, but an illusion obviously is a pretty powerful
Absolutely.
creation, even if it's a phantom creation. But then it makes me want to say, because I remember reading a kind of joking saying that, God knew all along Adam was going to take that apple and do what he's going to do, because I don't want to say he, but God was aware, it was aware that Adam, for all of his, what's the word, peace, being in the garden, still had parts that were jumbled, that weren't quite the Rubik's Cube worked out. And by just the power that comes with the illusion of the tree of good and evil, that would overwhelm that small part and create that sense of separation, etc., etc., etc.
And I agree.
Right?
I do agree that the Creator knew that this was going to take
So this had to happen,
it,
because then you wouldn't have the journey back,
right.
and
And you would not be
the
Elohim.
Creator wouldn't have anything to watch.
Right. Well, with the movie, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying that this.
Okay.
It was. If you read Genesis the way it's actually written, you will see that it was all of this was pre-planned.
Preordained.
Yeah, preordained. all of this, everything happened the way it was supposed to. Now it's up to us to complete the journey back.
But it also gives us a forgiveness, a quality of forgiveness in coming to an understanding of the state that we're in. Right? In a way, you're supposed to be lost and find your way back. That's a bit of maybe a bad way to say it. So it's not like everybody else has got it right and you're the one who's out of step. It's the journey of this life. Whether you get it in 2 seconds, or you get it in 80 years, or you half get it and then you got to go, I don't know, be a cockroach in the next one. So I don't know, who knows? But okay.
I'm looking for something.
But for me anyway, I'm content to have ordered my steps, ordered my thinking, in the sense that the button to push in yourself is the dotted circle.
This is the thing, and I want to probably end with this. What I was looking for was the response that that Jesus gave to Nicodemus about beginning, what was he responding to? Nicodemus said that we know that you are a teacher from God, for no man could perform these miracles. And then Jesus says, you cannot see the kingdom unless you are born again, unless you return to beginning. What did miracles and teaching have to do with the kingdom and beginning? You see, why would he respond? Why did he not say, I am a teacher, or I am not, or whatever? He did not acknowledge those things. So what I'm saying is that regardless of what I or anyone else does from this perch in terms of facilitation, the ultimate objective is that we cannot have any perception of the principles that guide the life that we are, or the spiritual, or the other realm. We cannot have a perception of those principles without us being at the place of beginning. Why? Because that's where the principles were developed. In other words, you got to go to where you came from. Can you see that? That's what he's saying. So when you make the statement about the life of the illusion, it's like we have to allow the illusion to die before we can get to, when I say die, I don't mean die in terms of a death as we see it will fall away from us. We have to allow that to happen before we can get to beginning. And Nicodemus could not get to that at that moment because he asked the question about being, the womb and that kind of thing. And Jesus was saying, you got to go back to the womb of beginning, because in question they were talking about a womb. So how do you go back to the womb of beginning? How do you get to that place where what we call balance is there, or the illusion is no longer there? How do you get there? What do you do? What do we do? How do we get there?
Well, this is the big question, isn't it?
How do we do it?
And the answer I would have from what I understood in my earlier life anyway was I wasn't going to get there through any study of Christian scripture. I found more affinity trying to better understand what was coming out of Buddha's teaching, because of the whole thing about quietness, meditation, trying to not pay attention to self, but find a sense of connection.
With what?
That's the journey. That's.
See, and that's what the reason I say with what is because the sense of connection, or the reality of connection, must be with the other sparks, because the vessel was shattered. So that's the connection. Our desire, what we are trying to do is connect to something that we're already connected to. We're trying to connect to God. We're trying to connect to this being or this entity in the other realm. When in reality, we are supposed to be connecting the sparks here. That's how the new earth comes into being. And the way we do that is by desire. Our desire is to connect the sparks so that the flame can become a raging fire, thus purifying the thoughts, the heart, or whatever of mankind itself. Can you see that? That's the journey itself, as opposed to connected to something, in the underworld. That's not what we're supposed to be connected to.
Well, but I mean, can't you also? I'm just defending this sort of notion of meditation. Then, I mean, even the Buddha, 5 years, 7 years in the wilderness, and came back and said, "No, that ain't it."
Yeah.
Everybody's out there starving themselves to death, eating grass and bark, and they're so connected You know, they got muscles like this, but eating bark. But they ain't having any fun, they're not living life, they're not walking among their fellow sparks.
Yeah.
And that's why basically it all distilled down to the sort of, as the French would say, the vulgarized version, which just means for the population. It was just, don't worry about it so much and live a moderate
And
life, and you'll be close enough and living enough in the feeling that you'll do fine.
but see, in the American Hebrew, there's no difference between the word for meditation and the word for prayer. Both of them are the same thing. The purpose of meditation is what? It's balance. That's what you want, balance, right?
But I think if, for me, I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's helped me to better understand what prayer is, because that comes
Okay,
from
okay.
a different culture,
Right.
right? To have journeyed over to try to understand what meditation is trying to say. And that's how you wind up with Alan Watts and people like that in the 70s and 60s writing about,
Yeah.
you know? Because sometimes you've got to be the Buddhist to be a better Christian, so to speak, to understand the truth better, you know?
Well, and
This is the sad
really,
thing about, or we went through Kabbalah, we do a lot of Jewish, Americ base to try to to reveal more, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise was that sort of Christian teaching that we had.
if you,
It's all fine.
but see, if you look at pre-Constantine Christianity, it doesn't differ that much from Buddhism or meditation anyway.
It wouldn't bother me at all.
It does not. It does not differ. The essence. I believe that the whole purpose for Catholicism was to push man towards acknowledging who he is. Because there's nothing that creates more of an illusion of separation than Catholicism. And the business of religion, especially in the Western world, that's where it came from, Catholicism. So it separates, it teaches separation, not by saying you are separate from God, but we are superior to you because I'm the Pope, I'm the priest, I'm the bishop. That sense of separation is what it teaches, and that same separation is perpetuated. The sense of it is perpetuated in the church. I'm the pastor. We're the deacons. That's y'all out there. You see, as opposed to all of us being on the same page, and no one can do this except the bishop or the priest or the pastor, etc. As opposed to saying all of us are not only, not all of us have the ability to do this. It's just a matter of uncovering, who we are, what's in us. Does that make sense?
But isn't that an aspect that the Eastern Orthodox, that was part of the fundamental reason for the split in the church?
And
Eastern Orthodox maintained, they didn't go for a pope. They said that's blasphemy.
yeah, but even at that, they still perpetuated the separation by virtue of the ecclesiastical order. The ecclesiastical order itself creates separation. If you look at the spiritual teachers, they're always in the midst. I'm your servant. You're not mine. But the ecclesiastical order says, you serve me. They don't say it verbally, but in all their actions, that's the expectation. The whole idea of the robe, the collar, the reverend, the Dr. So-and-so, or this, is so that you will regard them differently than you do everyone else. And that in itself is perpetuating the illusion of separation. I told you once before that one of the reasons when I first started preaching, I would wear a suit on Sunday. Because during the week, if you wear one, people will treat you different. Or when I introduce myself, I'm James Richard. But if I say I'm Reverend Richard, things are different. And that should not be the case. But they are different. So that whole idea of the ecclesiastical order itself is separation. So that have to be dispensed with. we have to just throw that in the trash can and deal with it from where we are. If you walk into this room, it will appear that I'm the teacher because I'm sitting on this stool. But that's not the case. Every one of us is doing this. But the ecclesiastical order says you listen while I talk. If you come to Radio Faith in the morning, you find 6 people probably sitting around the table talking. And people asking questions. Everyone does this because it tears down walls. This guy says to me, one of my cousins who's a pastor, says to me, when he was here during July, and I was talking about the 17th for the cookout, and he says to me, so you socialize with your members? And I'm like, huh? It stunned me at first because I'm so far removed from that until it was just strange to hear that. And then, of course it came back. And my response was, of course, why don't you? And the idea of me thinking that I'm not supposed to socialize with you because I am the preacher, I'm the leader, what does that do? Separation. And that is the reason every congregation that I have ever pastored, from the first up to now, I know everybody in there. I know all the family connections. I deal, and it is because I interact. We are one. And that's the way it has always been. So there cannot be any sense of superiority or separation. And that is interpreted as my saying that, my encouraging rather, disrespect for the ministry, which is crazy. Which is real crazy. So
when you create something that false, I can understand why you'd have to defend it, right? You pull back the curtain and you find, well,
Right, it's just me.
I'm not gonna talk trash today, but
yeah.
you find some not nice things.
Yeah.
So put a nice robe on it and sit in one of those throne-like chairs, and that's what it is.
Have somebody fan you.
So I gotta get me a function instead of a stool, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's and I did not understand the reason that I actually came out of that pulpit thingy until a little while ago. That, many, many years I started teaching from the floor. And I didn't understand the reason. And now I understand that just the structure of it gives you a sense of superiority, or indicates that to the people who are sitting in front of you. I'm above you, that kind of thing. And when in Exodus 20, around verse 20, it talks about, it says to Moses, do not build an elevated altar, lest when you mount the altar, men will see your nakedness. And that's a physical thing, but the spiritual of that is, don't place yourself above other people because they'll see under your robe that you were talking about. They'll see who you really are.
Everything is
That's what it's talking about. Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All your business is straight.
No, it's interesting because I can see all this into business, and not just business, organization, any institution, and the difficulty you have trying to create an environment working with other people where you understand you're separated by role, but that's not a class distinction. It's just responsibilities to divide up the work kind of thing. It's very hard to have that Most of what I hear people complain about is they're in an environment where the boss thinks he walks on water, or she, or whatever.
Yeah,
And it's all reinforced by the kind of behavior that people adopt to survive and not lose their job, and then that makes him or her even feel more like he's supposed to be the answer, the oracle. Bring all your problems to me and I'll give you all the answers. Instead of saying, just like you need to hear from your doctor occasionally, you know, I don't know.
yeah.
Okay, now we gotta go someplace,
Right.
together, right? Very hard to do.
So, that's it. We done? Sheldon said we done, so I suppose that's it.